Hey everyone, welcome once again to my YouTube channel, the Delali Network, in short TDN. I want to thank all my followers and listeners for sharing my first video, that is the introductory video. I would ask that may you continue to comment, continue to share, and continue to subscribe to my channel. In today's video, we are going to look at how to apply to schools abroad, and we are going to focus on Canada. So before one will even consider studying abroad, the first thing you have to decide on is which particular country you want to go to. And for the purposes of our education, I will be touching on Canada today. So I've captioned some factors which we are going to look at when you want to study abroad. The first factor that I would like to talk about is the programs that are offered by some of these institutions. So in Canada, we have various designated learning institutions, DLIs, which is made up of colleges, polytechnics, and universities. And this category of DLIs that I've mentioned have various programs which they offer. So depending on what career path you want to tour, or whatever you want to study, it's very, very important to settle on what program you want to come and study here in Canada. Now, moving on to the next point, we are also going to look at the tuition fees. International education is very, very expensive. And if you don't choose the right programs and the right schools, at the end of the day, you might end up ditching the school. So it's very important that before you even make the application to a particular school, before throwing the application fee away, look at the tuition fee for your program before you settle on that particular program and that particular school as well. The next one we are going to talk about is the various entries. So applying to schools in Canada, there are 3 entries which you can apply to. The first one is what we call the fall semester. And the fall semester is the major semester, which usually begins in August or September. Then the next one is what we call the winter or the spring semester, which usually begins in January. And the final one is the summer semester, which begins in May, June. So out of these 3 terms or these 3 entries, you have to choose the one which you want to apply to. But note, it is not every school that has programs for all these 3 semesters or these 3 entries that I have mentioned. So before you put in the application, it's very important to check what entry that your program has made available before you go ahead to say you want to put in the application. Then the next one we'll talk about are the admission requirements. Now with the admission requirement, mostly is captured on the various schools' websites. And when you go to the school's website, you see a whole lot of information. But then, don't go and focus on information for domestic students. Technically, as you are applying from outside Canada, once you don't have the Canadian passport or you are not a permanent resident of Canada, it simply means you are an international student. So it's very important to check what the requirement says for international students before you put in the application. People do mistakes and just go and check the domestic requirement. It's very important that you check the international requirement so that you don't do any mistake when putting in the application. The next factor I'll be talking about is the tuition deposit policies and refunds. Because of the cap and the provincial attestation letter issues now in Canada, most of these schools that do not even take tuition deposit at first have now introduced a tuition deposit policy. This is simply because there is limited slots and a lot of people are competing for that limited slot. So it's very important to check what the school's tuition deposit policy is before you go ahead to even pay that deposit once you gain admission. The reason why it's important to check these tuition deposit policies is because it will help you prepare, and also it will help you know whether there will be a refund in case there is a visa denial, because you paying the tuition deposit doesn't automatically guarantee an approval. And there are some schools when you pay these tuition deposits, even when you are denied a visa, they will refund the money to you. So before you commit any money to any school to pay a deposit, ensure you check the refund policy very well. Understand it. If you are confused, just email the international admissions team and they'll clarify everything for you before you commit. Then the next point we'll talk about is the location and the weather. For me, I am not a fan of big cities or big towns. So when you want to select a destination which you want to come to in Canada, it's very important that you look at certain factors like the cost of living, because sometimes settling in as a fresh student is very, very difficult. So I always advise people that you start from somewhere smaller, maybe a place like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, before you progress to a bigger city like, let's say, Toronto or Vancouver when you're done with school. And for the weather, some of these provinces that are less expensive, the weather conditions are harsh, especially when it's winter. For example, a place like Manitoba, a place like Saskatoon, the weather conditions are mostly worse when it's winter time as compared to places like Vancouver. But then, because of the living conditions or the living expenses there, I advise that you go in for some of these provinces or cities so that you start from there. And when you are done with school, you can progress and move to wherever you want to move to. Then the next thing I will be talking about is post graduation work permit, what we call the PGWP. Now, Canada has made it a nice way to keep most of their international students once they are done with school. But this doesn't mean it's automatic. It comes with certain requirements. When your visa is approved and you get to the port of entry, you are given the study permit. And on your study permit, there are various terms and conditions. You have to read that critically and ensure that you obey it whilst you are in school, so that when you are done with school, whatever level, you can proceed to apply your PGWP provided you meet the requirement. So, for instance, when you come here and come and study an 8 months to 12 months program, that is technically a 1 year program. If it's not a master's program, you are going to get a 1 year postgraduate work permit. If you meet other requirements like the language test, it's a new requirement which was just introduced recently. That was late last year. So before you apply to some of these schools in Canada, you have to look at whether these schools and their programs are postgraduate work permit eligible or not. Now, when you study a program which is 16 months or more, be it a diploma, be it a master's, be it a bachelor's, or what have you, you qualify for a 3 year postgraduate work permit. And the 3 year postgraduate work permit is enough time to help you do whatever you want to do. One of the new and exciting changes to the postgraduate work policy that I love most is those who are taking a 1 year master's program. Those who are taking a 1 year master's program, they now qualify for a 3 year postgraduate work permit once they are done with school. And when you are done with school, you have to write the language test, that is the CELPIP or the IELTS general test, and you can use that to apply for your PGWP. But then you have to get a score of band 7 for all sections. That is when you complete a university in Canada. And when you complete a college in Canada, you need a band 5 for all levels. So before you make that decision to study at a college, a polytechnic, or a university, you have to ask yourself whether you want a 1 year postgraduate work permit or a 3 year postgraduate work permit, so that it will guide your decision. Also, I would also like to talk about how we can research schools. Sometimes people come to our DMs and ask us to mention names of schools for them. Studying abroad usually doesn't work that way. We are now in an information age and there is a lot of information on the internet. So, one simple way by which we can all search for schools in Canada is using Google Chrome. Once you just go onto Google Chrome, the search box, you just type, let's say, University of Manitoba or University of New Brunswick or University of Lethbridge. the website is going to pop up. You click on it and you go and read every information that applies to international students so that you be guided on the next step to take or on what to do when putting in your application. Now, let's come and talk about the undergraduate programs. In Canada, applying to undergraduate programs is a very simple and easy step. It is not stressful as compared to those who want to apply for the graduate program, that is the master's or the PhD. So before you apply for your undergraduate program, you have to make ready your high school transcript or your SHS transcript. You also have to make available your WAEC results. You have to buy a WAEC scratch card. You have to get your English proficiency letter, though it's not compulsory because most of the schools in Canada here recognize Ghana as an English speaking country. So automatically the English test scoring or the proficiency is waived for admission purposes. But remember, before you apply for your PGWP, your postgraduate work permit, you are going to need the English test. But for admission purposes, you don't need that. So for undergraduates, as I mentioned earlier, one, you need your SHS transcript. Two, you need your WAEC result. Three, you need the WAEC scratch card. And four, you also need what we call the application fee. And the application fee varies from school to school. It can be $80, it can be $100, it can be $120. So depending on the school of your choice, that is when you know what application fee you are going to pay. So don't go and give $500, $1,000, $800 to any agent to apply for a school in Canada for you, especially those who are coming to do the undergraduate programs here. It's a very simple step. Once you have this document that I've mentioned and your application fee, you just go to the school's website and create an account. And most of these schools, creating an account is very simple. You just look for the information on their website on how to create an account. Once you create an account, you read and fill in all the respective details and then upload whatever document you need to upload and you submit your application. Now, some of the schools or the provinces also have a centralized system. For example, when you go to Alberta, they have the Apply Alberta, a centralized system where you can use to apply to most of the schools. Now, when you go to Ontario too, they also have a centralized system which you can also use to apply. But then I prefer to apply directly through the school's website because it's very simple and it's very easier for me. Now, coming to graduate studies. Graduate studies is a very serious business, just like how undergraduate studies is also a very serious business. And with graduate studies, it requires more dedication, more time, more perseverance, and more research work. Applying to master's program here, applying to PhD programs here, there are a lot of things you have to look out for. First of all, you have to ensure that you read what the departmental requirement is. There are general graduate school requirements and there are general departmental requirements as well. So before you put in the application for your graduate school, you should ensure that you look at what the general requirement for graduate school says and what the departmental requirement says. And most often, schools here in Canada, they will tell you a 3.0 for your last 2 years or some number of your last credit hours. So you take note of that. It's very important to look at the GPA requirement before you put in that application. Then you also need what we call the academic resume or the CV. You are also going to need letters of recommendations. It can either be 2 or 3. And these letters of recommendation, please don't go and take physical recommendation. Most of the schools want what we call electronic recommendations. And once you have the information of your lecturers who are willing to submit recommendations on your behalf, when you are filling in the details during the application process, you key in their information such as their full names, their contact, their position, their institutional emails, and the institutions at which they work in. Once you key in these details and you submit your application, they are going to receive a direct notification from their side and they will submit your recommendation letters electronically for you. Now, some of these schools also will require you to secure a supervisor before you apply. Some of the programs in Canada here, especially those who are looking to come and do something related to research, something related to thesis, because most of these programs are funded. And if you are lucky, you are going to get a full funding. So before you apply to some of these programs, they will ask you to email a professor or a prospective supervisor to get his or her acceptance before putting in the application. That is why I said it's very important to read the departmental requirements before putting in the application. Some of these programs will require what we call a writing sample. And for the letter of intent or the statement of purpose or personal statement is one thing you can also do away with. Most of these graduate programs will also require that. So it is very important that these key things are looked at. I would like to say Canada is an amazing country to come and study, and it has been good so far for me. But studying abroad requires a whole lot of preparation. It requires perseverance, it requires hard work, and it requires patience. You have to work behind the scene for several months, for several years before you see the fruits of whatever hard work you are putting in. In my next video, I'll be talking about the documents one needs to apply to undergraduate programs in Canada, to graduate programs, that is Masters and PhD. I'll be touching on each of these documents and what each of them entails. Also, I'll be giving you a list of schools that require no tuition deposits or low tuition deposits so that you can consider them in the various provinces when you are doing your application. See you in my next video. Take care. Bye bye.